Alright guys, welcome back. We are under a big heat advisory and flood watch yet again. So today we're going to stay off the water today, and we're going to do a lot of bit of tackle shop stuff. We're also going to do a little bit of video here on just catching people up on some of the stuff that's coming, as well as the stuff that's already been released that people aren't really talking about in terms of this forward-facing sonar stuff. Most people are tired, I know, about talking about it, because there are individuals who have basically made their monetization on YouTube over the whole forward-facing sonar Livescope debate. And that's fine. Everybody is entitled to their opinion, but they're not entitled to the facts, as we like to say. And for me, it gets kind of like real because of where I live, okay? I make no bones about it. I live in the suburbs of D.C., where all the politics and all the legislation and all the stuff comes home to roost, okay? And so I hear about it. I hear about it from legislators in Virginia and in Maryland. I hear about it from people, who are in Congress, who live within 5 mile radius of where I live, from other parts of the country that kind of want to like poke those of us who fish hey, so what's this really all about? What is this stuff? Because they may not be anglers. They may not, but they've got to work with like all the information that's coming to them inundated, that oftentimes is fueled from misinformation that exists a lot of times on YouTube and social media. And sometimes it gets a little bit frustrating. I know it gets a lot frustrating when people tired about the drama and tired of all that stuff, and everything always just seems to be like Debbie Downer, negative. Oh, Bassmaster's going to fail. Oh, MLF registrations are down. People don't, all because of forward-facing sonar, and it's absolutely not. It's absolutely nothing like in reality in terms of when you talk to people at the ramp, or you talk to people in your communities as to why they don't fish anymore as much, or why people who used to enter tournaments don't enter tournaments anymore. Or I know firsthand 3 individuals that have sold their bass boat in the last 16 months. Had nothing to do with forward-facing sonar, guys. But that's the narrative that they want, because that fits their narrative, right? It allows them to say, hey, when in reality it's more about the economy. It's more about interest rates. The Fed met yesterday. They didn't do anything with interest rates. They didn't cut interest rates. That does not help any of us. It doesn't in terms of financing a boat, financing a truck, financing our homes. All that stuff is wrapped up in a correlation post-pandemic. And while the timelines seem to be correlated, forward-facing sonar started in 2018, and now we've seen this decline. Well, you've got to also look at the broader context of everything that's happened since 2018 and the arrival of forward-facing sonar. Not everything exists in the fishing vacuum, as much as some of these YouTubers want everybody to believe that forward-facing sonar is the big evil that is destroying fishing. It's not destroying fishing. Okay? Talk to guides. I know guides that are booming with business. Okay? I've talked to guides that are actually booked. Because, okay, if you're going to pay $500, or depending on where you are, $250 to $500 to have a guide take you out on the tidal Potomac or any other place to go and catch largemouth bass, you want to catch fish, right? Like, if you're going to, and we're not talking about tournament anglers, okay? We get wrapped up in this whole, tournament angler thing, okay? Which is great, but it's a subset of the broader market. Who buys more tackle? The recreational angler or the tournament angler? Across the country. I don't know many tournament anglers that are walking into Walmart and buying rods and reels and baits. I just don't. But yet, that's a significant portion of their sales in their sporting goods department. Same with Dick's. Same with Shell. Same with these big box stores. I don't know many tournament anglers walking in those stores and buying baits off the shelf. It's recreational anglers. That is the largest percentage of where the sales come from. Okay? In terms of tackle and rods and reels and things like that. Boats, probably a different argument. Obviously if you're going to fish in tournaments, you got to have a boat or a kayak, right? And so you can maybe make that argument in terms of that there's a bigger percentage of people, especially on the high-end boats, like the Icon boats. Everyone that I know that has an Icon boat fishes competitively, either locally with clubs on the Potomac or Upper Bay, or they fish BFLs, Toyota Series, stuff like that. Okay, so you can't really compare a lot of stuff. Guys, a lot of guys are buying tracker boats, buying Lowe's boats, buying things like that, are not fishing major tournaments. Okay, they're recreational anglers. People who have John boats, most people who have kayaks are not fishing tournaments. Look at the kayak sales. 1 million kayak sales were sold. Okay, how do you equate that? How do you equate almost 1 million kayaks being sold, and yet the largest kayak tournament trail, the two largest kayak tournament trails in terms of registration in the country right now are Bassmasters Kayak Open Series and the Native Watercraft Big Bass Power Hour Series, okay? 200 anglers. Okay? And that's not even the average, that's probably the most. 200 to 225 is probably the most, okay? Well, 1 million kayaks have been sold. Okay, so most people are still fishing, right? So when the forward-facing sonar argument comes in, it always is baffling to me, having a biology background and majoring in biology in college and talking with biologists, fish biologists especially. You know, in this part of the country, we're kind of blessed with a lot of really good biology, like wildlife, natural biology. A lot of people who go into state and local agencies, your local, DWR, DNR, or the National Department of Interior, or Wildlife, or Parks. A lot of them graduate from schools right within like 6 to 8 hours of where I'm sitting, okay? Smaller schools most people have never heard of. Frostburg up in Western Maryland, okay? Places like that, okay? And when you talk to the people who are actually involved, that are actually in conservation, in wildlife, actually doing the studies, okay? Not people like me, they're just sitting doing a video, or people like Randy Blockett in his workshop trying to be the authority. People who are actually actually examining the science under a microscope. They're getting out there, they're doing tests, they're testing the vegetation, the aquatic vegetation, they're testing the populations, they're tagging the fish, they're doing all this stuff. And when you live where I live in the country, we hear it all, we see it all, because we have the Chesapeake Bay, which is such a vital resource to the country, okay, broadly. And there are so many studies going on for the striped bass, and so many legislations and like restrictions and regulations that are being tried, restricting during the spawn, no fishing, creel limits. I mean, they've been throwing darts at the board for over decades here, okay, trying to figure out, okay, what's the best thing for, not only the species of fish, but also the ecosystem, right? And not a single one of those studies has actually pointed to forward-facing sonar and Livescope technology being the evil culprit that a lot of people, especially Randy Blockett's community, would like for people to believe. You can cherry-pick a small sample study. And usually what you'll find is a lot of that is done on smaller lakes, which makes sense, right? Like, if a lake is small in comparison to, say, a Champlain, right? Okay? Or big lakes in Texas, okay? The smaller the lake, the more condensed the fishing populations can be, right? There's less water for them to, move in, right? And so if you try to do a study on a small lake or a pond, those results may be skewed in terms of behavioral movement. Bass are moving away from that sonar, right? As opposed to the ocean, as opposed to the Chesapeake Bay or the Potomac River or Lake Champlain, okay? Cayute, places that are just massive. Smith Mountain Lake, prime example, okay? What'd they find? They found nothing. That it doesn't there's no evidence to support that it's impacting, that Livescope the technology, okay? Here's the caveat I want to make. There's no evidence to support, in reality, for any scientific foundational, declaration that forward-facing sonar has negative impacts on fish behavior. There's none, okay? I don't care what they say, there's none. Because I've talked to dozens of people in the field. There is none. Now, what has forward-facing sonar done in reality? And in this regard, those people like Randy Blockett are touching on important topics that are worth discussion and worth observation, okay? Is forward-facing sonar potentially is allowing for the catch rates to increase. We've seen that in some tournaments, right? We've seen that where a lot of tournaments are catching more bass. And we equate that to forward-facing sonar. Now that can certainly impact fish populations, okay? But the technology itself, in terms of the sonar, in terms of those arguments that, oh, it's disrupting the ecosystem, it's impacting fish behavior, you know, allowing the anglers to see fish real time, which is what Livescope in reality is, you know, can impact fish populations. Well, we're still studying that, okay? And that may actually be true. Like, again, you've got to be objective about these things. It's not all or nothing. That point of the argument may be true because we are seeing more fish being caught. Now, the counterbalance to that, if you talk to people, is fish care. Advancements in fish care. The live wells that exist today are not the same live well technology that existed when Randy Blockett fished a Bassmaster Classic on the James River in Richmond, Virginia, when I first saw Randy Blockett, okay, in my life for the first time, okay? The technology of the live well and the oxygen and all that is every bit as advanced today as electronic technology is, okay? So now we are actually seeing the technology catch up to balance forward-facing sonar technology that's putting more fish in the boat, and we are seeing less fish kills, less fish. Now there are certainly circumstances where someone can point the finger and say, aha, like Champlain, I think 2 years ago. Okay, I think it was after a Toyota, might have been a Toyota Series event or a Tackle Warehouse event, I'm pretty sure, where there was, and it became, you know, like, and a lot of that is, okay, today I'm not fishing. I'm not fishing today because there's a heat advisory, okay? You know, you guys have seen the heat. You guys know it's been 100 degrees for days on end in the DMV. That's District of Maryland and Virginia, okay? Right? And so if you're going out and you're catching fish and it's not, like, for example, okay, Major League Fishing on the Potomac River, pre-fishing, okay? Heading into the tournament, 100 degrees. Guys catching fish, 100 degrees outside. Water temperature spiking, 86 degrees, 88 degrees. You're back at some of those creeks, it's 89 degrees, okay? That's something to take a look at, okay? Because when you're catching fish, big fish especially, in 98 degree aromatic temperature, 89, 90 degree water temperature, okay? Okay, you're gonna. That's an issue, and so scheduling becomes a greater issue for fish conservation if you talk to fish biologists, okay, than forward-facing sonar will ever be. Okay, why is Maryland restricting striped bass, rockfish striped bass during April, months of April, and all that stuff? Why is Pennsylvania restricting our ability to catch smallmouth bass? Before April, I think it is, like April 8th or April 6th, whatever like that, during that stuff. You can't target smallmouth bass on their inland river systems. Okay, because it's for conservation. It has nothing to do with technology. Okay, right? It has to do with, okay, we want to protect the spawn, we want to protect these fish when they're vulnerable during these periods of time, okay, so that the population can keep sustaining itself, okay? You also have to remember that most of us are not removing fish. Okay, if you're tournament anglers, you're not removing fish. The fish are getting returned to the fishery. So how we return them to the fishery? MLF's got their boat that they use. All the fish get dropped in a boat, especially Bass Pro Tour, and then that boat goes out and returns fish throughout the fishery. It's not like they're just dumped at docks anymore. Okay, like years past. Okay, there have been advancements, right? And so when you hear about the forward-facing technology, those arguments have to be based in scientific fact. Now, when you talk about the behavioral impact of anglers being able to catch more fish, that's a different discussion, okay? And how those fish are cared for after their catch. I believe and I have seen and I know firsthand that the technology nowadays is light years ahead of where it was when Randy Blackett was fishing professionally. Okay, in terms of the live well, in terms of how long fish can stay in a live well when you're transporting them to weigh-ins. But organizations like MLF, they've already made changes. They've already made some conservation changes to returning the bass directly after the catch. They're already doing things to address conservation, okay? And I think they take it, a lot of these organizations have been taking it on the chin over this whole, like, forward-facing sonar narrative in terms of negative that's really been brought about by a few people with big followings, right? Without ever offering up any real, like, supporting data, right? Real, like, case studies, real, like, academia, real from scientists, like, real, like, it's all been speculative, right? And so what do we know about so far about acoustic disturbance, temporary displacement, behavioral changes in our fish, okay, in a habitat or ecosystem that has been directly impacted by increased sonar, Livescope, forward-facing technology? Physiological injury or life expectancy because of the increase of forward-facing sonar technology. Very little, guys. Very little. And I know the argument is, well, we need to get ahead of it. We need to get ahead of it. At what cost? Okay? The cost of destroying professional bass fishing? Okay? Is that how we need to get so ahead of it that we actually destroy the integrity of bass fishing as a professional sport or a sport with payouts based on inaccurate data, little data, with no concrete evidence? Okay, just emotions, just a feeling, okay? And we see this, okay? I don't want to be hyperbolic and be the jackass in the room, but I'm beginning to believe this is a Russia hoax. I am. I'm beginning to believe, I live in the town. I hear it. I hear about it all day. Doesn't matter what's on the radio, doesn't matter what's in the neighborhood, doesn't matter what's at the ramp. People that are connected to politics in Washington, D.C. all live around me, okay? And I hear it all the time. And when I talk to them about this kinds of stuff, it's another hoax. It's the forward-facing sonar hoax. That's what it is. It is a cult. It is a hoax. And how I say that is they have no scientific, academic, university, or federal, okay, case studies to fall back on to support the assertions that they have been making for the last 2 years. Their assertions are all wrapped up in convincing people my age, who were born in the 70s, that fishing is no longer the way it was when we grew up, and therefore it's wrong. Therefore, they're wrapping it up with emotion. Who does that? Who does that politically in our country today? Who wraps everything up with emotion and not fact? Who distorts everything based on political outcomes and not reality? Who does that? Answer that question for yourself. Okay? And those people have been proven wrong and wrong and wrong and wrong time after time, because it's all based in emotions. Okay? Emotions. No, I'm sorry, I can't have a baby. Okay? Science says that. Biology says that. I do not have the means to have a baby, okay? Regardless if someone emotionally believes, oh, it is true, you can have a baby. No, I can't, okay? Show me the biology. Show me the physiological evidence. Show everything we've learned about biology has been thrown under the bus, right? Trust the science, right? Until the science, right, demonstrates to us that we're wrong. And then suddenly, oh my God, we've all been through that. We were through that in the pandemic, guys. The forward-facing sonar hoax cult is the same thing. And listen, full disclosure, I don't even have forward-facing sonar. That's what I love when people come after me. They're like, oh, you're a homer forward. I don't even have it. Don't have it. I go out with people who have it, and I talk to people who have it, who've used it, who've shown me, like, this is what I do, this is how I set it up, this is what happens, this is what I've seen. I've had forward-facing sonar for 2 years, this is what I've seen, the differences, I've been able to do this, it's helped me do this. I'm objective, to a point. Until I see our community just being overrun by a cult that will ultimately have negative impacts down the line for the fishing community. I do not care if you put forward-facing sonar in your boat. If I was guiding right now on the tidal Potomac, I damn sure would have forward-facing sonar. I damn sure. Because I would have clients in the boat that I want to put on fish. And it provides the opportunity to locate fish precisely, easier. It allows you to eliminate areas faster, okay? If you're on a guide trip for 6 hours or 8 hours, totally understand it. Totally understand it, okay? And people, we talk a lot about bass fishing, but forward-facing sonar for crappie fishing is massive. It is massive, okay? If you're a guide, for those people who are taking people out for crappie, okay? So let's make sure we're staying in our lanes here. That it's not all about emotion. I'm like, yeah, fishing has evolved, fishing has changed, but it is what we make it. We should still be taking kids fishing. That's not changing because of over here, a lot of tournament anglers are utilizing forward-facing sonar, and these young guys are winning these events, and we don't like that. So we feel like they haven't had to do the work. They haven't had to put in the work like we did to learn all the traditional, which that argument is such bullshit. I know guys back in the 70s and 80s that fished, all Redman, Stren Series, all before FLW, before Walmart, that were one-dimensional anglers. That all they did was throw a jig. All they did was throw a worm. That was like their wheel. That's all they did. And if the jig bite wasn't on, they got their ass handed to them. It wasn't like they were like, they knew they could throw the swim bait. Didn't exist. They could throw the chatterbait. Didn't exist. It was like everybody had their lane that they stayed in. And that's their confidence. That's where the whole confidence bait comes in. Well, now we have so many broader categories than we had in the 70s and 80s and even the 90s, right? Now we have all these different evolutionary bait presentation and techniques, right? Okay? That we didn't have back then. We had the Texas rig, the Carolina rig. But now we've got the Neko, the Jika. We've got all these different rigs now, right? And so there's a lot more over here for people to have to master, right? Like if you're gonna throw people in that box that, well, they can't catch fish in the traditional methods. Well, most people are not fishing the traditional methods anymore because the times have changed. People who used to be really big crankbait guys had to evolve because the swim bait came along and started catching more fish, right? People who used to, I think of like Lou Daves in the 70s and 80s, okay? Where I live, where I grew up, okay? On the James River. Like, well, what's happened to the worm? What's happened to soft plastics? The evolution of soft plastics, right? We now have paddle tail swim baits. Replace the freaking straight tail worms and curly tails, right? Like, in terms of people buying. Things change, okay? Same with the electronics. We've had electronics forever, okay? This is just now an evolution of the electronics. And yes, the live stuff, is a little bit different, okay? I will give them that. But everybody knows, and everybody that you talk to will tell you that they need further investigation into what the impacts are of this technology. That there is no conclusive evidence. And in some of the studies that have happened, that they've gone through, okay, and let me just give you a couple of the studies, and hopefully I can link them, if YouTube will let me link them, in the description. Look up the Neely in 2023, okay? Investigated the effects of live image sonar on catfish, blue catfish, okay? In terms of angler perception and in reality in terms of the behavior. You can find a lot of these studies, guys, if you're interested, okay? And I know we have an attention span that's like this small, okay? You can go on ResearchGate and you can find the studies. And I'm telling you, there is no studies that support what Randy Blockett is actually saying in terms of the technology and the impacts on behavior and the impacts on the ecosystem. Now, obviously, the use of the technology may and could have a negative impact on the fishery, okay, in terms of populations. But if you look at the recent study, it shows that because so many of the individuals who have forward-facing sonar, to the tune of like over 80%, return fish, catch and release. Okay? They don't take the fish out of there that they've caught with forward-facing sonar and take it home. Okay? Most of the people who take fish home out of a river system or a lake fish from the bank. Okay? The majority of people. Studies have shown that. Tournament anglers, very rarely, take fish out of an ecosystem and take it home with them. Right? Especially smallmouth bass or largemouth bass. Crappie's probably a species where a lot more crappie get removed. But then again, a lot more crappie, through the process, populations, a lot more crappie are produced. Like in a lake or a reservoir. More so than bass populations in terms of the number. Okay? So again, there's a balance within an ecosystem. But when we make like blanketed statements, so sure, we need to watch the increased catch rates that can be brought about by forward-facing sonar. But more importantly, we need to examine the technology of fish care. That's the solution. The solution is not banning forward-facing sonar. Okay? So what they've used is they've tried to use the sensitivity that we all have about wanting to keep our fisheries sustainable. They've used that emotionally to go after what the real root cause for them really is. And the fact of the matter is it's younger people under the age of 30 are winning tournaments now. Because the technology allows them in a tournament setting to eliminate areas and then to also locate fish to be caught, as opposed to 25 years ago, where it was harder to do that. Now, remember, how many of us have been out there and of course I'm biased in terms of my rivers because that's where I have the most experience on. But how many of us have gone to the creeks of a tidal fishery, or maybe your creeks of the creek arms of your lake or whatever, and just gotten skunked and been like, where did all the fish go? Like, the fish didn't hop out of the water and get in a car and go somewhere, okay? The fish just went somewhere else in that body of water, okay? The fish didn't just disappear. They went somewhere. They moved somewhere, right? And so go back 20 years in your head, if you're my age, okay, in your teens and in your 20s. What did you do on that day? You got skunked. You stayed in those creeks and you kept fishing. You didn't go out in the channel. You didn't go out. Why? Because up until that point, we didn't really have the technology, right, to really support that. Because people have tried that and it's an immense, you're in the middle of Smith Mountain Lake, blind, trying to target fish, right? And you spend all day out there and you don't catch anything. It's like going out in the ocean, going out in the Chesapeake Bay and trying to find bluefish. Nobody does that without technology, guys. Okay? I'm just saying, like, we need to actually have some common sense in these discussions about now people do go in the creeks and the fish aren't there. Thinking Hartwell, places like Hartwell, Lake Murray, that have people go in those places. And that bite's not there. They now can move to deeper water, 20, 25, 30 feet of water where bass are suspended. That 25 years ago, that was never going to happen. That would never happen. Okay? That's what forward-facing sonar and the advances in all sonar, all electronics, has helped in that area. It has unlocked the code. It has unlocked that fish. It really has. To where 25 years ago, we weren't out there targeting. Everybody just thought, man, fish disappeared. Or they just weren't biting. Well, now we know the fish aren't there. Okay? The fish are not there. Okay? Because we have that live sonar to tell us there are no fish there. So then we can move and go to another location. And I experienced that going out with people with Livescope, and an amazement. It's how fast you can eliminate water. Okay? That's, for me, that was the most like amazing thing of, I know there's fish here. I've caught fish here. I've caught plenty of fish here. You go in there and you're like, you go like an hour without catching something, and you're like, look, there's hardly any fish here. And you pull out and you go into the channel or you go into the flats and you like, and that's where all the fish are, right? Like, it's like they have been moving, okay? And so the elimination of water is probably the number one thing I think beneficial about Livescope in terms of locating fish. It's eliminating the water, especially if you're in a tournament, but also for us as individuals, as recreational anglers. You know, we can go out there and eliminate water pretty quickly and not waste our day and not come back to the ramp skunked. You know, okay, it looks like they're suspended out in 18 feet of water. Okay, so let's work on that. You know, let's do that today. Then we go back a week or so later and they're up in the creeks and understanding that fish behavior. So I think forward facing sonar is ultimately beneficial for anglers as understanding fish behavior, because it reinforces, okay, these are the conditions today, and the fish are not here in these creeks. Then you go out and find the fish, and then you realize, okay, over time, you know what? When it gets to be 80 to 85 degrees, when the water temperature is in the mid 80s, and when the aromatic temperatures are in the 90s, the fish move out of the creeks and move out here into the bay, into Belmont Bay, or they move up into the river, up into Occoquan, or they move out of the creeks and more into cooler, deeper water, mouths of creeks, as opposed to being all the way back up in the shallow in August when it's freaking 100 degrees outside and the water temperature is 92 degrees. These are all things that make us all better anglers. These are tools that we can use to make us understand more about what the fish behaviors are in our fisheries. So there have been and people need to say this to Randy Blockett, okay? And again, it all could just be a hoax show, and it all could just be for clicks, and it could just be for monetization. I don't really know if Randy Blockett actually really believes what he really believes. Maybe there should be a summit, and maybe there should be debate in the community at the next Classic. Maybe the Classic should hold a summit and have like a peer review to discuss things in the fishing community like other organizations do. Like, I don't know. But there's been no peer-reviewed paper or study that has documented negative psychological injury or reduced life expectancy, okay, for bass due to exposure to forward-facing sonar. And that's my challenge for Randy Blockett. Show us the receipts. Because I've talked to people at the universities. There isn't any. And the state agencies. It's a concern. People but there isn't any. Okay? Federal dollars are not being allocated in a massive way to address forward-facing sonar technology because there hasn't been any underlying studies to then get a major study to undertake that. Okay? That's what we're being told. Okay? Acoustic disturbance certainly may cause temporary displacement. If, for example, everybody's in Powell's Creek on the tidal Potomac, there's 25 boats in there and they're all running Livescope. Okay? One boat? No. Now, if you throw 50 boats into some place, okay, and everybody's running, yeah. I mean, of course, that can cause temporary displacement, along their lateral lines of stuff that's going on, okay? But typically what happens in the studies so far is the fish return. So it's just like almost you spooked the fish. Same as if you ran in there with your boat and like you spooked them, okay? And so those are the things like that we've got to look at it. Bassmaster created a panel. I don't know if this has ever really been discussed, but Bassmaster created a panel to monitor sonar use back in 2020, end of 2023 and 2024 season, to collect data. Okay? And what did they find? Like, that data wasn't used to change the rules for Bassmaster. Think about that. What's being used for the call for changes? It's pressure. from the cult. And I don't think there are as many of them as people think they are. They're just loud. It's like progressives. It's like it's like, in politics. It's like, it's like a lot of these movements in our country, like, you name it, okay, in terms of the Middle East conflicts, in terms of whatever, in terms of wars and conflicts. It's like they're not representative of the larger community. They're just more vocal. And obviously they get covered by the media more because the media has a left-leaning bias, in my opinion. So that's what happens, okay? And so Randy Blackett gets talked about a lot because he's at the forefront. He's like the big advocate. He's the leader of the cult, in my opinion. Like, but I respect his opinion. But I just think that, like, you have to understand and be objective about the emotion that's involved and the fact of where Randy Blackett is coming from as a former professional angler and looking back on, he's reached that point of his life. And we're all going to get there, guys. We're all going to get there. It's not disrespectful to Randy Blackett. I don't have a problem or an issue with Randy Blackett. I disagree with 60% of the things he says because they're not rooted in science. They're rooted in emotion, okay? There are plenty of other things that Randy talks about that I agree with. But when it comes to the technology, I think he's wrong. I think he'll be proven wrong. I think the St. Lawrence event up there proved it wrong. Guys still caught the fish. So when people make those arguments that guys can't catch fish without forward-facing sonar, that's bullshit. Guys are catching fish without forward-facing sonar all the way up the ranks. Fishing is not dying, guys. Think about this. 15 years ago, did we have high school leagues? Do we have high schoolers running bass boats and fishing in competitions? Did we have a college tour? Did we have a college series 15 years ago? A dedicated college series like the Abu Garcia College Fishing MLF? Kayak fishing. Where was kayak fishing 15 years ago as opposed to where it is today? Right? I mean, all these arguments being made can be dismissed with metrics and facts. Okay? They can. And they should be. They should be pushed back. They should be pushed back against. Prove it. Show us the evidence. Not the emotion, not what you think is happening, what is happening based on scientific data. We do that with aquatic vegetation. We do that with spraying and chemicals. We do all these studies. But again, there is no peer-reviewed study supporting any of this crap. It's all political pressure being put on bass. And I commend NPFL for going a different route. But NPFL didn't go a different route to protect the fish. Okay? We need to be very clear about that. NPFL went non-forward-facing sonar as a business decision. Not as an ecological, physiological, protect the fish decision. Okay? I commend them for that. They saw an opportunity. That's what capitalism is all about. They saw an opportunity to take some of those anglers from MLF and Bassmaster that are 45, 55, 65 years old and move them away because they didn't want to adapt with the technology. I commend them for that. I mean, well done them because they've got now a niche, in the same way that people today are, and I actually think this would be awesome. They're calling for like a pro-am, older, like 60 and up, 55 and up, 60 and up pro-am tour, like for a Bassmaster, tour for the guys that retire from the Elite Series and they can keep on fishing in 3 or 5 events in a pro-am tour. Okay, just like the golf does. Hey, awesome. You see a business opportunity, you take advantage of it. That's America, okay? I don't fault NPFL. I commend the National Professional Fishing League, for going non-forward-facing sonar. It didn't have nothing to do with science. It didn't. Listen to what's being said as to, like, who they're going after. The whole point was to go after anglers that don't want to use that technology. It has nothing to do about what the impacts of the technology itself. It has to do with filling a void. Tournaments are about registrations. Okay? It's a business. Right? We'll see what happens. Because if people begin, younger people, this is where the argument comes in about the NPFL, that it's going to be here today, gone tomorrow. Because younger kids, okay, coming up, are using the technology. So what's going to happen is you got guys 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, high school and college now, all utilizing forward-facing sonar. Suddenly they're going to just ditch forward-facing sonar when they're 25 and go fish the MPFL. Like, there's going to be a problem there. Okay? Because the younger generations are. I see it out on the Tidal Potomac all the time. Okay? Young guys with boats. The problem right now is not forward-facing sonar. Okay? In terms of like why there may be a decline in people buying boats. It has nothing to do with forward-facing sonar. It has to do with the fact that interest rates are so damn high. Financing costs are so damn high. Okay? And people are in debt out the wazoo on their house. They can't refinance their houses anymore. That's what Randy Blockett's not telling you guys. Okay? People were refinancing their houses 7 to 10 years ago and buying boats. All right? They can't do that now because the interest rates are higher now than what the interest rate is on their existing mortgage. And a decade ago, after the 2008 freaking bust, interest rates were low. People got locked in at 2%. Okay, 2.25%, 2.5%. Well, if interest rates are 6.5%, refinancing's not doing them any good. Right? The equity lines against your house, they're like in the shitter. People use those to buy boats and trucks to haul their boats. Okay? Like, so, again, we need to be honest. Okay? And people are not being honest with you. I try to keep it objective. I try to keep it real. Okay? The data is out there for you to look at. Okay? For forward-facing sonar. There is no peer review studies backing up what the forward-facing sonar hoax is telling people. Whether or not you can make the argument is it's all about clicks and all about monetization on YouTube, I don't know. Could be. But there really isn't. And so the arguments on the one hand have to be summed up like this. Every concern level, if you look at scientific studies in terms of the environment, in terms of bass, in terms of populations, in terms of aquatic vegetation, in terms of all this stuff, is all based on concern levels. What are the concern levels? Okay? Concern level for behavior disruption, low. Concern, all pertaining to forward-facing sonar, guys. Concern for stress and physiological impact, low to very low. Catch, release, and targeting, okay? Higher, especially for crappie, okay? Separate study. Is this crappie oriented? That study showed a higher rate for catch, release, and targeting, okay? Population impact, okay? Low. The majority of people fishing today fish, catch, and release. Harvests are low. Across the board, if you take the whole country, okay? Now, you can always cherry pick a lake and say, oh, well, look right here, okay? Population impact for panfish, low to moderate. In pressured fisheries, smaller lakes. That's what that means, if you look at that study. Okay, ecosystem worldwide effects. No significant documented effects. Let me repeat that. Ecosystem wider effects. No significant documented effects. Okay, concern level. Unknown, likely, low. Folks, that's all you need to know. Okay? That's all you need to know. So when people talk to you about all this crap, biological impacts of forward-facing sonar, there's no evidence to support it. Is there evidence to support Randy Blockett's assertions in terms of the broader fishing the fishing tournament scene, like how that's changed and yeah, that's all emotion-based. If you don't like young kids coming up and kicking people's asses that have been on tour for 25 years, yeah, if you're so attached to a specific angler and that angler now is finishing half or in the bottom half now, and you equate it with guys finishing ahead of him because those anglers are using forward-facing sonar, that's on you. That's on you. Adapt, overcome, adapt. Okay, that's the new game. Okay, you don't eliminate things, right? You don't because you want to make it a level playing field for your guy, for the guys my age. Okay, wait. Like, okay, it's just like any other technology, right? But the biological stuff that I've covered today, I hope you guys understand that it's a hoax, okay, in terms of the biology and physiological stuff. Because there just isn't any evidence yet. As much as they want to say there is, there isn't. It's all emotion, and that's why I call it a hoax. Now, I could get proven wrong in a decade from now, okay? But as it stands right now today, 2025, heading, almost July, in middle of July, going into August, my conclusion is it's a hoax. It's a hoax. It's a witch hunt against people who are using a technology that's out there, that's readily available, that's helping them locate and target fish. You may not like that technique in the same way that I may not like some of the traditional techniques, so don't use it. But you can't restrict other people from being able to use it. And I think all the stuff that's happening with the tours, I think they need to get a backbone. I think they need to freaking just say, enough is enough. This is what we're doing. And educate. MLF needs to educate its fan base that forward-facing sonar, have a summit, have a whatever, okay? Have a podcast where you got the head guy at your university or a guy who did the study and educate people, You got to remember this, and where I live, and I know most of you probably don't have this experience, we have snakeheads, okay? Look how the narrative around snakehead has completely changed now. Once they found out that they could make money off it. Okay? Snakehead's very, very bad. Snakehead's very, very bad. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, right? Well, now they find out, snakeheads are going to destroy the bass populations of the tidal Potomac fishery. Snakeheads are going to do this. Snakeheads are going to do that. Remember all that? Where are we at today? Hasn't really impacted the fishery. In fact, a lot of people who are local, who are here 365 days a year, actually think there's been very little impact. And the snakehead fishing has become a boom. It's become an ecotourism in Virginia. People from all over the country come to target snakeheads in Virginia. That's good for Virginia. Okay? Now, obviously, still needs to be monitored. Okay? But the reality of it is all the fear-mongering didn't pan out. And that's what I'm saying about this forward-facing sonar stuff. Okay? On big bodies of water and tidal and changing tidal systems and all of that stuff. There's just, again, low impact to no impact. The studies are already there that are telling us that, guys. So we need to stop buying in to the forward-facing sonar hoax. All right, guys.